Is there any chance that this guy comprehends what we're discussing? Jonathan Miller grinned across the meeting table without even lowering his voice. It all began when Michael Turner responded with a mocking laugh. I doubt it, but hey, $50 million for a quiet little Asian robot. I'll take that deal any day. A private conference with a broad view of Manhattan on the 100th story of the most prestigious building in New York. What started out as a historic alliance became something far more shady, a silent battle of looks, disdain, and outright bigotry. Wei Jiang, a Chinese billionaire who started his technological company from the ground up, was seated at the top of the table. His business, Dragon Tech Industries, was poised to take over the US market after revolutionizing medical robotics in Asia. During the meeting, we didn't use English. He decided not to, not because he couldn't. It protected her from the haughtiness of the West. Andre Silva, a 26-year-old man with short hair, black skin, and a soldier's straight posture, was there, quietly serving coffee and filing papers. He was dismissed by everyone in the room as simply another unseen caterer. Andre was offering more than just coffee, though he was keeping an eye on everything. Every insult, microaggression, and hushed word was muttered as if it were unintelligible. Andre, however, heard everything. The racist hints, the snickers, the finger-snapping that treated him like a servant. And the devaluation of Wei as only an exotic barrier in his drive for power. The subsequent events were more than merely a corporate reversal. In disguise, it was a revolution in coffee serving. The top floor of the glass and steel structure in the center of Manhattan's financial district was dedicated to the Miller Court boardroom. It was more than a simple workplace. It was an assertion of authority. The paneling was dark oak and extended from floor to ceiling. The crystal chandeliers that hung like hanging diamonds reflected the golden lights of the conference table, a masterwork of Italian marble. Miller Corp. CEO Jonathan Miller looked stunning in his $3,000 navy blue suit. He had the measured smile of someone who always anticipated to win, tall, and his gray hair was brushed back. Vice President Michael Turner sat beside him, more impatient, more aggressive, and younger. His rapacious smile was overshadowed by the brilliance of his Swiss watch. The man they thought they were going to defeat sat across the table. Wei Jiang were dressed simply in an unassuming black suit. His hair was black, his hands were still on the table, completely in line. He has established a $2 billion medical technology business at the age of 52. However, he was treated like an Asian curiosity in that setting. Sitting just behind him was his interpreter, a slender, middle-aged man who provided translations. In whispers as needed, most of the time, however, Wei simply listened. The Americans wriggled impatiently at his stillness. Andre Silva moved fluidly between the chairs, rearranging glasses and making sure the papers were in order. The guest list did not include his name. Her eyes were taking in everything, but the room had not yet heard her words. He observed Michael's apprehensive laughter, Jonathan's patronizing smiles, and our impassive royalty upholding her dignity in a space meant to reduce her. They drew the lines of war. Although the space appeared opulent, something considerably more sinister was simmering. It was more than just a meeting. They were all in the dark about who was actually being tested, but it was a test. Despite being only 26 years old, Andre had been undervalued his whole life. The son of a maid, who spent 16 years working for the same affluent family. He grew up witnessing the inner workings of genuine authority. He overheard discussions about mergers, acquisitions, and investments while serving tea in his mother's employer's office. He discovered that genuine commerce was conducted in whispers rather than speeches. However, nobody was aware that Andre had been in China for 3 years. He received a scholarship at Peking University to study engineering. He knew the customs, mannerisms, and subtleties that go beyond words, and he spoke Mandarin well. He found that speaking Chinese and being black was a mix that people just couldn't comprehend when he arrived to New York after returning to Brazil. As a result, he worked odd jobs, paid his bills, gave his mother money, and kept his gifts to himself, until tonight, with the assurance of a man used to setting the tone. Jonathan lifted her drink of scotch. He referred to a future in which invention is unrestricted and to global business. He grinned widely, as though he had just spoken something shady off a magazine cover. Wei merely nodded, silently lifted her glass, and sipped. No translation, no words. Without lowering his voice significantly, Michael leaned over and whispered, "Was that a yes, or simply a courteous nod?" Wei spoke to his translator in Chinese. The man turned to the table without a word. Mr. Zhang is grateful for the expression. That was it. So it went. Jonathan gave lengthy, enthusiastic talks about the revolutionary possibilities of combining Miller Corp's worldwide distribution with DragonTech's robotic technology. He discussed market conquest, timetables, and numbers. He made a motion as though directing an unseen audience. Wei answered with a succinct, measured sentence. Everything was changed to a neutral sentence by the translator. The first to lose patience was Michael. Andre felt the sting of the words as he leaned towards Jonathan and mumbled, "Are we seriously negotiating with a statue? This is insane." The request wasn't that, it was the familiarity, the tone, that had not been earned. Her eyes caught every detail, every covert insult, every instance of disdain as he silently continued to arrange the paperwork with steady hands. The men in suits were unaware that someone they regarded as invisible was fully understanding every discriminatory word. And the humble kitchen helper, Andre Silva, was going to teach them the true cost of conceit. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this tale of justice and reversal, because what transpired when Andre finally spoke was much more than a straightforward translation. Those CEOs will always remember that lesson. Under the pretext of professional civility, the first hour of the meeting was a parade of mic. Jonathan started talking more slowly, sounding out each word as though he was speaking to a young child. He made an exaggerated gesture and said, "We want to buy her company." It made Michael laugh. Michael pretended to draw in the air as he said, "Perhaps we should draw or mime. What if dollars were represented by a stick figure?" Wei Zhang didn't do anything. The interpreter interpreted her responses, which were always succinct, in an objective manner. But Andre saw something that the executives were blind to. Wei was tapping the table gently in a certain manner with her fingertips. Morse coding was used. Andre was familiar with those signals from his time at Shanghai University studying marine engineering. Wei was capturing everything and transmitting a silent message. Verify that you comprehend his. He was serving coffee, and Andre nearly choked on it. He spoke Chinese, and Wei knew it. However, for what length of time had the Chinese billionaire been aware that there was a person present who could comprehend every hurtful word being spoken? Michael got up suddenly and walked impatiently, theatrically, to the window. "This will take all night, Jonathan." It is obvious that the man is not genuinely interested in concluding the sale. Jonathan mumbled patience. Asians enjoy drama. In order to later accept anything, they act as though they are difficult to persuade. Andre's blood boiled. Every discriminatory utterance was like a dagger piercing her flesh. However, something much more agonizing was present. The way we took every insult without retaliating, preserving her honor by remaining silent in a way that Americans took as submission. Michael remarked, "You know what irritates me?" And he went back to the table, that attitude of Eastern wisdom, as though his silence meant something. It's simply Asian obstinacy posing as philosophy. Jonathan gave a quiet laugh. It's likely that he is unaware of what we are providing. For what, man? 50 million. For a business that manufactures tiny surgical robots. For $10 million, we can locate any San Francisco startup doing the same thing. Because he was well aware of what DragonTech Industries stood for, Andre arranged documents with shaking hands, not out of fear, but out of controlled wrath. He had kept a close eye on Wei's surgical robots' growth during his 3 years in Shanghai. They weren't tiny automatons. With an 80% reduction in error rates in intricate heart procedures, these were life-saving devices. Wei had agreements with the biggest hospitals in Asia. 15 filed patents. and technology so sophisticated that American institutions had been attempting for years to replicate his algorithms without success. But to Michael and Jonathan, he was simply another wealthy, obstinate Asian. Andre had a 3-year memory span. Beijing, 2021 winter. He had recently received a scholarship for low-income Black students that allowed him to participate in the university's exchange program. He first met Wei at a technical innovation talk in December. Wei spent 2 hours discussing the potential of medical technology to democratize healthcare in underdeveloped nations. Andre found it fascinating. He approached Wei shyly after the lecture to pose a question in his still rudimentary Chinese. "Do you think a young Brazilian can make a contribution to this kind of study?" In Mandarin, Andre inquired. Wei grinned the first sincere grin he had ever saw her display. "There is no ethnicity or color to creativity." In Chinese, Wei Yi answered, "You obviously possess the same curiosity as she does." Wei Yi became his informal tutor in the months that followed. They discussed prejudices, limitations on human potential, engineering, and cultural boundaries. Wei informed him about meetings where American executives assumed he didn't understand English, about fake contracts masquerading as partnerships, and about the challenges of being taken seriously in the United States. One chilly winter afternoon, Wei Yi stated, "Maybe I'll find someone who really sees me, not just my bank account." Andre would never forget those words. And now, 3 years later, he was seeing just what we had foreseen. Andre was no longer a student observing from a distance this time. Though he was not visible to everyone, he had the power to alter everything. Having officially run out of patience, Jonathan launched another offensive. "You can inform her supervisor that our offer is final, you see, 50 million, accept it or reject it. We can leave now if he wants to spend the entire night acting out Eastern drama." Michael gave a forceful nod. "To be honest, I'm getting tired of this cultural theater. We can locate a Chinese business that is more cooperative." For the first time, Wei Yi addressed him directly, directing a Chinese statement into the air as though he were thinking about the city lights. The translator paused, obviously uneasy about what he had heard. "What was it?" he said. Jonathan pushed. The interpreter cleared his throat. He expressed his admiration for American hospitality. However, Andre fully grasped what we had actually said. Does anyone in this room realize how much more beneficial it is to construct bridges rather than walls? Andre felt the words hit him like a lightning strike. We wasn't merely discussing business. He was requesting assistance. He sought someone who could see past country, skin color, and discrimination masquerading as cultural superiority. Andre gently cleared his throat. He felt for the first time that night that he could not keep quiet much longer. His trembling hands ceased. His shoulders erect a little. Michael impatiently tapped the table with his fingers. For what length of time will we have to endure this spectacle? It's like trying to conduct business with a Chinese wall, to be honest. Jonathan let out a big laugh. If nothing else, a wall wouldn't waste his time seeming enigmatic. Andre's hands clenched. Her temples were hammering with blood. Every disparaging utterance served as a reminder of all the instances in which he had been disregarded, undervalued, and viewed as invisible. Teachers at school believed he wouldn't comprehend difficult ideas. His peers were shocked to learn that he was a merit scholar rather than a quota student while he was in college. This position was different from prior ones when her IQ was continuously questioned. He was in control this time. The capacity for knowledge, comprehension, and the ability to create bridges where others saw only impassable barriers. Wei murmured something nearly inaudible, un-Chinese once more. Andre got it exactly. Does anyone here actually think she's a human being? Weiss's voice has a rich. Andre immediately recognized the sadness. He too had been carrying that same anguish for years. The anguish of being reduced to stereotypes, having her humanity called into question, and being viewed as less competent just because she did not conform to the norm. Jonathan took a quick look at his pricey wristwatch. "Last try," he said, speaking to the translator, as though we were both deaf and unable. Tell him that if we don't close this today, the offer is off the table. We don't have time for these Eastern games. Andre let out a sigh. Her hands ceased to tremble entirely. They would never shudder in front of those men again, in fact, because he understood then that he was more than a passive observer of injustice. In the face of all that conceit, he held the key to a revolution that was about to blow up. The issue was that Michael and Jonathan were unaware that the unassuming kitchen helper was in possession of a covert weapon that might ruin not only that encounter but her decades-long reputation. Before making the choice that would alter everything, Andre gave Wei one more glance. And in that glance, he saw a chance to permanently alter the game's rules in addition to a cry for assistance. She was carefully storing in her memory every slur he heard. They were recording every instance. Of rudeness, Andre would transmit justice rather than just words when it came time to speak. When Michael got up to answer an important call, the chance presented itself. He left the room with the phone held to his ear and said, "Sorry, it's from the board." Wei and his translator were briefly alone, while Jonathan used the occasion to pour himself more whiskey. Andre then deliberately tripped and knocked over an empty tray next to Wei's chair. Wei did not look back or display any surprise as he knelt down to pick up the items and hurriedly murmured in Chinese, "Mr. Zhang, my name is Andre Silva. I understand everything they are saying. Can I help you?" Andre felt a surge of adrenaline as he tapped the table 3 times and said, "Morse code for yes." He then said in a low voice in Chinese, "Wait for my cue. When I say sleeping dragon, be ready." Wei was more than just a victim of discrimination. He was a tactician who waited for the ideal opportunity to retaliate. Michael returned, visibly irritated. "Problems with the shareholders," he said. "With all of this weight, they are getting impatient. Today is when they want a decision." Jonathan let out a dramatic sigh. Perhaps his acquaintance from the East needs to realize that in America, time is money. Speaking slowly and loudly, as though addressing a deaf person, he spoke straight to Wei. "Now we need a response." Jonathan waved his hand to halt the translator before she could convert. "Don't bother, she got it. Despite their stubbornness, Asians are not unintelligent." Andre quietly clenched his hands. She became more determined with every subsequent insult. He had heard variants of these identical words all his life. For a black man, he might even be intelligent. His ability to express himself clearly is impressive. This time, however, was different from the others of his race. He was suffering from more than simply prejudice this time. To destroy it, he was collecting ammunition. While on his 5-minute break, Andre hurried to the loo and dialed his sister, New York Herald investigative journalist, He muttered, "I need an urgent favor," into the phone. "Do you have contacts at the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission?" "Andre, why are you whispering? And what the hell does his SEC know? It's complicated, but I'm witnessing an attempted corporate fraud, live. I need to know if anyone can track suspicious bank transfers from Miller Corp over the last 6 months." There was a pause on the other end. Camilla knew her brother well enough to know he wasn't exaggerating. "Give me 20 minutes, she said. "And Andre, be careful." Andre returned to the room just as Michael was completely losing his composure. "Honestly, this has gone beyond ridiculous," she huffed, pacing back and forth. "We make a $50 million offer, and he sits there pretending he's the Emperor of China." Jonathan laughed, clearly enjoying the show. "Calm down, Mike. Let him play his Asian card. In the end, they all cave. It's just a matter of pressure." We spoke again in Chinese, a longer sentence this time. The translator hesitated visibly. "Mr. Zhang would like to review the documents more carefully." "Review," Michael exploded. "There are 15 pages. How long does it take a Chinese person to read 15 pages? Andre felt his blood boil. He could no longer pretend he was just cleaning tables. His 3 years in Shanghai studying advanced engineering at China's most competitive university were reduced to that ignorant comment about reading speed. When the phone subtly vibrated, It was Camila's message. I found something big. Do you need this information? Andre typed quickly. Miller Corp has an open investigation for contract manipulation with Asian companies. 2 similar cases in the last 2 years, both involving fraudulent clauses in acquisitions. Forward everything. Within seconds, his phone was receiving PDF files. SEC reports complaints from other Asian companies. A clear pattern of predatory behavior. Jonathan and Michael had a history. Wei wasn't the first victim, she was just the next one. Andre organized the information mentally as he continued his work. Dragantech wasn't just another robotics company. It was a pioneer in artificial intelligence-assisted surgery with technology decades ahead of its American competitors. Jonathan and Michael weren't trying to form a partnership. They were attempting technological theft on a billion-dollar scale. Michael checked his watch again. Last chance, he said, addressing the translator. Tell him our patience is at an end. Either he accepts now or we'll look to his competitors. The translator began to speak in Chinese, but Wei gently interrupted her by raising her hand. For the first time that evening, she smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was loaded with meaning. Sleeping dragon, Wei said clearly in Chinese, looking directly at Andre. It was the cue, the moment Andre had been waiting for. Her sister had just sent him the ammunition he needed. Wei had set the perfect trap, and now it was time to show these arrogant executives the true price of underestimation. Andre cleared his throat softly. His hands stopped shaking, his shoulders straightened. For the first time in his life, he was about to use his intelligence, not to survive, but to dominate. But what Jonathan and Michael didn't know was that the simple kitchen assistant wasn't just about to speak Chinese. He was about to reveal evidence that would put them both in jail. Andre's phone vibrated one last time. Camila had sent the icing on the cake, audio recordings of an internal Miller Corp meeting where Jonathan and Michael openly discussed stealing Chinese technology through rigged contracts and using investors' prejudice against Asians to justify fraudulent acquisitions. Andre took a deep breath. It wasn't just about Wei anymore. It wasn't just about racial prejudice anymore. It was about systematic justice. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly when Andre stood next to Wei and bowed respectfully. Gentlemen, Andre said, her voice firm and clear. There are a few things you need to know about this meeting. Wei drummed on the table once more, but this time the pattern was different. Execute. Jonathan and Michael didn't even notice at first, as he was still considered human furniture. Jonathan dropped his whiskey glass. Michael turned his head so quickly that he almost lost his balance. First, Andre continued, maintaining his Olympian calm. Mr. Zhang understands English perfectly. He heard every prejudiced word you uttered. Second, I am not just a kitchen assistant. I have a degree in engineering from Shanghai University. I am fluent in Mandarin, and I am a witness to everything that happened here. The color drained completely from Jonathan's face. Michael opened his Wei, stood up for the first time that evening. He looked directly at Jonathan and Michael, and spoke in perfect English, with an impeccable American accent. Gentlemen, I believe we have a lot to talk about. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the weight of justice about to collapse on 2 decades of arrogance and corporate crime. Andre had not only broken her invisibility, he had detonated a bomb that would destroy his man's lives forever. But there were still secrets in the room that even Andre couldn't imagine, secrets that would make revenge even sweeter and the fall even more devastating. The silence that followed was deafening. Jonathan Miller, for the first time in his 20-year career, was speechless. Michael Turner seemed to have turned into a statue, his mouth half open, his eyes wide, fixed on Andre. You speak Chinese?" stammered Jonathan, her voice high-pitched like a frightened child. "Fluent," replied Andre, keeping his tone calm. 3 years in Shanghai, engineering degree from the most competitive university in China. I heard every insult, every racist joke, every prejudiced comment you made." Andre was his best student, she said in impeccable English. "When I heard he was working temporarily in New York, I specifically asked him to be here today. Michael tried to regain his composure. This is a trap. You set this up. Andre pulled out his phone and showed the screen to both of them. My sister, Camila Silva from the New York Herald, sent me some interesting evidence about you. He swiped his finger across the screen. SEC investigation into contract manipulation. 2 Asian companies have already reported you for fraud. 23 million. In pending fines, we make the contract really complicated. They sign without understanding it, and we get the technology for free. The recording continued with Jonathan. It's like stealing candy from a baby. They think we're being respectful with all this cultural ceremony, but we're actually pulling the wool over her eyes. Michael turned white as a sheet. How did you get this? We stood up slowly, her presence filling the entire room. Discrete cameras, Mr. Turner. Very advanced Chinese technology. You underestimated not only my intelligence, but also my preparation. Andre connected his phone to the room's projector. SEC documents, internal Miller Corp emails, and a list of Asian companies that had fallen victim to the same scheme appeared on the wall. 16 companies defrauded in 5 years. You specialize in exploiting American investors' prejudice against Asians. Jonathan was clearly desperate. We can negotiate. What do you want? More money? Equity? We shook his head slowly. I don't want his dirty money, Mr. Miller. I want justice. Andre pressed another button on the phone. My sister has already sent all this evidence to the FBI, the SEC, and 5 different newspapers. The story will be on the front page tomorrow. Michael slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. We're ruined. Wei walked over to Andre and held out his hand. Thank you for having the courage to break the silence, he said in Chinese. Andre replied in the same language. Thank you for teaching me that dignity is not negotiable. Jonathan tried one last desperate gambit. You can't do this. We have lawyers, we have influence. Andre smiled for the first time that night. Gentlemen, you have just discovered that you underestimated the wrong people, a silent Asian and an invisible black man. As you like to say, karma is an Asian word, and today she is speaking fluently in justice. The empire of arrogance and prejudice that Jonathan and Michael had built was crumbling in real time. But there was still one last revelation that would make his downfall even more spectacular. And Andre was ready to deliver the final blow. Revenge was just beginning. How would 2 men who thought they were untouchable discover that messing with the wrong people could cost them everything? 6 months later, Andre Silva was sitting in his new office on the 150th floor of the Dragon Tech Americas building with a privileged view of all of Manhattan. Vice President of International Strategic Relations, salary of $200,000 a year, apartment. On the Upper East Side, paid for entirely by the company. Jonathan Miller filed for personal bankruptcy 3 months after the scandal. Investigated by the FBI for corporate fraud, he lost his house, his car, his wife, and custody of his children. Michael Turner was sentenced to 2 years in prison and now worked as a used car salesman in the suburbs of Detroit. Miller Corp was bought by Dragon Tech for only $10 million, 1/10 of the original offer they had arrogantly rejected. Do you regret anything? Wei asked, during an executive meeting. Serving traditional Chinese tea in porcelain cups. Andre smiled, looking out at the city through the glass. I regret taking so long to speak up. Camilla's Article 1, the Surprise for investigative journalism. The title, The Kitchen Assistant, Who Toppled an Empire of Prejudice. Wei created a mentoring program for young black people interested in technology. There were already 15 scholarship recipients studying at the best universities in China with all costs paid. Do you know what his biggest mistake was? Asked Andre, assuming that invisibility means insignificance. Replied Wei in Portuguese, a language he had learned specifically to honor his Brazilian friend. Jonathan and Michael thought they were buying technology from a silent Chinese man with the help of an invisible black man. They discovered too late that they had messed with the wrong people. The real revenge wasn't destroying their lives. It was building something bigger than they ever dreamed of being. Today, While Jonathan struggles to pay his rent, Andre runs a $2 billion technology empire. The lesson is simple. Never underestimate someone you don't know. That invisible person serving his coffee may be fluent in 5 languages. That quiet Asian may be recording every prejudiced word he utters. And when these people finally speak, the whole world will stop to listen. If this story has inspired him to never give up on his dreams, no matter who tries to diminish him, subscribe to the channel because stories of justice like this happen every day and someone needs to tell.